Welcome to the McFeely Mess Podcast at Inforum.com. In-depth conversations and opinion covering a variety of topics from the world of news, sports, and more. Here's Mike McFeely.
Welcome to another episode of the McFeely Mess Podcast, 25,000-foot edition, as the Forum plane is flying back from Carbondale, Illinois to Fargo after North Dakota State defeated Southern Illinois 24-3 at Saluki Stadium.
You sounded real confident on that final
well,
score.
I wasn't. The game was so not memorable that I've already blocked it from my memory. Jeff Kolpack of the Forum. This is Mike McFeely, by the way, of the Forum. Jeff Kolpack of the Forum and Stacey Anderson, honcho at WDAY-TV, joining me on the flight back. So I just described this game as unmemorable. Jeff, is that accurate? How would you describe the ball game?
Yeah, I guess, we use words like in the story, workmanlike, or they got the job done, but there just was no pizzazz. I mean, there was no great long plays. There was the turnover was late in the game by the Gibbets interception and the fumble on the opening drive by Missouri State. But other than that, is this sort of like I called it in my column, like Missouri State. Southern.
That's how memorable the game was. Was that they played Southern Illinois? So
Southern Illinois, I thought they did a good job mucking it up, and that's what they had to do. They weren't as talented. They had a true freshman quarterback in his first start. He just kind of tried to muck it up. And I think they did a good job of that, actually.
I think that first quarter the first half would have went about an hour, a little over an hour, except everybody used every one of their timeouts to try to score at the end of the half there. I think, Jeff, it really felt to me like, and Mike, that NDSU had just come off playing a really big rival and have one more on the horizon. It felt like they just wanted to get done what they needed to get done, try to avoid injuries, make it thorough but complete, and I think that's probably what they looked at too.
Yeah, let's call it like it is. I mean, it's human nature. Tim Polasek all week could talk about this is not a trap game. We're not going to buy into it being a trap game. That's not who we are, and that's what you have to do as a head coach. But I mean, that's reality, right? UND was last week. South Dakota State is next week. This team had been hurting. Again, they're back to their true freshman quarterback. They got blown out in their previous 3 games. And these kids are watching that film. I mean, they're not stupid. They're watching that film. They're seeing that. And I thought SIU showed up much better defensively. I think Cam Miller said as much. Much better defensively than they had shown on film the previous 3 weeks. And so that's plus Cam's ankle injury didn't do him any favors either.
Well, let's go down that road, because that's where I was going next. Was NDSU quarterback Cam Miller hurt his ankle last week against UND with a weird, awkward slide, and they told us all week he was going to play, and he did. He started, played the entire game, but I don't think there was any question that he was hobbled from the start, Jeff, and then after a weird sort of third down and one call that they called a pass play to try to dump it to the tight end that Southern Illinois read and cut off the throws. Then Cam had to just run forward in the line into a pile of people. He came out of that pile of people noticeably limping and actually went to the sidelines for a play as Cole Payton, the backup, came in to try to run and get it on fourth down. How much of that played into NDSU just not being explosive today and not really looking like themselves offensively?
Yeah, majorly. I mean, here's the NDSU career leader in rushing touchdowns by a quarterback who was saddled with an injury, and effectively that took that part of the game out. He finished with 3 carries for -1 yard. That was him. And this is the career leader in rushing touchdowns for a quarterback. So obviously SIU knew that. I mean, they knew that his run game was null and void, so they didn't have to worry about that. So when we talk about the RPO system of reading the end, well, they know he's not going to run it, so forget about that package. And so I think it just severely limited what they could do.
I think that when they know that. I think SIU is very prepared with what NDSU was about to give them. I still think NDSU I think you got to take away from that the fact that they won the line of scrimmage on both sides of the ball. They limited the Salukis to 30 yards rushing. They rushed the ball. Shamar Brown, I thought, had a pretty good day today running the ball. I just, like I said, I think they were just gonna, they weren't gonna turn the page a hole on the playbook. Let's don't get anybody else injured. Let's go out there, workmanlike it, and get it done. I mean, we can talk about it being boring, or a boring game, but it was 24-3, and I didn't really feel like SIU really had mounted a threat the entire game. I mean, they drove the ball a little bit, but
yeah,
I didn't really get a feel
clearly
like
NDSU wasn't too worried about Missouri State, Southern Illinois scoring a lot of points. They weren't worried about the freshman quarterback hurting them. Southern Illinois couldn't run the ball at all. I mean, they didn't have much going. It was like a game where you just knew that they weren't going to score more than 10 or 13 points on the day.
Yeah.
And all NDSU had to do was get past that threshold, and they felt comfortable they were going to win the game. The nerve-wracking part for NDSU, though, I think, was that late in the game it was still 17-3, and that's a two-score game. And so if Southern Illinois goes in for a touchdown, all of a sudden it's 17-10, then you're opening the door to anything happening.
Right.
A weird turnover, a punt return for a touchdown. It just felt like NDSU should have been able to throttle these guys way earlier and then just kind of coast to the finish line.
You know, when they scored just before half, and then SIU had the ball, half ends, the Bison came out to receive the second half kickoff, and I go, well, this is going to be one of those games where all of a sudden you're up 21-3 after the first possession, third quarter, it's over, and I think the ball would start rolling. But today was one of those where nothing was going to happen easy. I think the Bison 3-and-outed, and I thought, I was talking to Dom on the side, I go, well, here we go. It's going to be, you're going to have to earn every point today.
Yeah, and what I wrote essentially was the really good teams, Stace, they bury the subpar teams early. They bury the wounded teams like SIU missing 9 guys. 3 of their 4 captains aren't playing. Really good teams just put those teams out to pasture in the first quarter, or at least the first half. That didn't happen today. And again, you attribute to A, Cam Miller's ankle, B, the spot in the schedule, but they still, it's a win.
But I still think there's plenty of concern about Cam Miller because his ankle also affected his throwing.
Yep.
And it affected what he could do in the pocket. He's pretty effective rolling out of the pocket, which then allows him to either fake it and pull it down and go, or roll out to his right or left and then hit a receiver that works himself open. And that part of the game was completely gone for NDSU. And then Cam also, it's his right ankle, was it, that was taped up. And so when he planted and tried to throw, he said after the game, it tweaked a couple times and he was inaccurate. He was not as accurate as he normally is. That was obvious. He missed a couple throws. He missed a touchdown pass by 5 yards. Braylon Henderson was wide open in the end zone running on a crosser, and Cam wasn't even close to him. And so that's just not Cam Miller. So we're going to look ahead here to the South Dakota State game soon enough, but that matters against South Dakota State, which is a way, way, way better team than Southern Illinois / Missouri State. And so, he's got to get healed in a hurry. Cam Miller's, I don't know if it's possible, but he's got to get hurt. He's got to get healthy quickly.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm no doctor and I'm no expert on sprained ankles, but when I played base, I had a couple. They don't heal overnight.
No. Nope.
It's...
And they can get tweaked at any time.
Yeah.
So he could come back Saturday against the Jacks and be just fine to start the game. And then the way it is, even, back when we had, high school athletic careers, you'd step on something wrong and you're right back to square one. And I think that's where Cam is right now. And I don't know that for the rest of the season that it's going to get fully healthy, even though it's not like a high sprain. It's just sort of a nagging sprained ankle.
It's varying degrees. I don't know if it's they say a 20-degree sprain or whatever. We obviously don't get that technical, and they wouldn't probably tell us. But I just, I don't think it's a good sign for NDSU heading into this week with their Walter Payton Award candidate ailing, if you will. And he obviously had, and like we said, a good chunk of his game, at least part of his game, very limited today.
You know, what they needed was a 24-3 lead at halftime, so Cole Payton could get a lot of reps and just, you know, then coast to that 36-3 win, you know, and just put 2 more on the board in the third quarter, be done with it, you know. And I think you're right. You know, what an angle like that needs is just time on a rehab table and not being stressed and pushed and landed on, because he came up twice that I could see during the game. Once for sure where he came up lame a little bit, you know, where you saw he had to come out where Cole came in, and you know they're lucky they do have a Cole Payton and something like that. You know, the jury's still out to see how much they can actually, when they do bring in Cole, they're not just running. Just, you know, it's not just a quarterback, you know, keep. It's something new, like the flea flicker, you know. So Cam Miller's injury is going to nag him all year, but I think with the emergence of Shamar Brown and Marika running the ball pretty well, and even Cole Payton, I think they're going to have to find more ways, I think, to distribute that whole workload.
Another scary sign for North Dakota State is that Cam Miller's not the only injured key player. There were several Bison players that went down today.
Kubitz, for one.
Nick Kubitz, the middle linebacker, apparently got dinged in the head in the first half. He was replaced by Luke Wirtz, who had been out for 2 weeks prior to this. And the Bison were down to their only middle linebacker because Nate Staling, the promising sophomore, redshirt sophomore,
third-year sophomore,
is out with a shoulder injury, and we don't know when or if he's going to return this year. And so Kubitz, Tim Powell said after the game, Kubitz said he wanted to go back in the game, but they held him out. But he didn't play the second half at all. Dylan Hendricks, NDSU's outstanding defensive end, top pass rusher, guy who can get to the quarterback, guy who could get to Mark Gronowski next week. On the last play of the first half, on just one of those plays like, you know, how does this happen? He comes off the snap. Before he gets to engage the Southern Illinois offensive lineman, he pulled up lame and went to the carpet in what appeared to be a non-contact injury and had an injured knee. Now he went down like a sack of bricks, tore off his helmet, grabbed his knee, looked upset about the injury.
The classic ACL sign.
The classic ACL sign. But Dylan Hendricks, after being looked over by trainers, did get up and walk off the field under his own power. And after the game, Tim Polsick said it looked better than we thought it was, or something like that.
He said we got some good news.
Got some good news.
Promising news.
And he might be able to play against South Dakota State. How effective or whatever, we don't know. But Dylan Hendricks went down with an injury. Cornerback Jalen Duffy, who was hurt a couple weeks ago at Illinois State, left the game in the first half with what appeared to be an elbow or an arm injury, did not return. He's their promising young cornerback who could be an all-conference type cornerback this year as a redshirt freshman. He went out. So that's 3 key defenders that went out with injuries. And we learned after the game that right tackle Mason Miller might have had an injury too, because he left the game in the first half and didn't come back. They moved Jake Rock to right tackle, put in
Lewinsky.
Jack Lewinsky.
Yeah, I keep thinking his dad, Chris.
Yeah, I keep thinking of Jack Lewinsky. Sorry, Jack. Yeah. I keep thinking of Chris. They moved him to guard, so Mason Miller apparently had something happen to him.
I felt that wasn't serious, though. He didn't seem concerned about it.
No, but
it's still there.
But it's still there. So, I mean, Cam Miller is the injury, but there's some other real key defenders, Jeff, that the Bison are going to have to need, or are going to need against South Dakota State.
Yeah, and this is not the team you want to go into shorthanded either. And South Dakota State had some question marks, I think, in a couple games, notably Augustana, where Gronowski threw a couple interceptions, and you're thinking, well, maybe things aren't as good as they were last year, but wow, they've turned it on the last couple weeks. they just buried Youngstown, which is if we get into the Valley later on in this podcast, this Valley is going south.
Yep. Is burying Youngstown really a headline? You know, I mean, I think that the Missouri Valley is taking the shape of FCS, where the separation is becoming more.
That's a good observation.
More and more the haves and the have-nots. So, I hear what you're saying about South Dakota State. I think that they lost a boatload of NFL talent, just talent in general last year, and that's still hard to replace. The injuries are hitting the Bison pretty hard, but and I'm going to say his name wrong, I know, but like he's watched Toby and Nene play, and I mean that kid's really Lashaka Rokes feels like Lashaka wasn't as good as he was the year before. I think he's really starting to play. There's that 58 big D tackle.
Keenan Wilson.
God, that kid he's got a future there.
Jackson Dudenheffer, by the way, did not play today. It was not on the trip. NDSU's outstanding defensive tackle. So they were already down a defensive lineman today. We don't know Dudenheffer's status, although we think that he had, what the heck was it? I think maybe an elbow injury as well. And so Dudenheffer was not there. We don't know his status for next week.
Yeah. So these young guys who are stepping up are going to have to keep doing it. I do like what Bison coaching staff has done the last couple of weeks by, through injury, through injury or through however you want to call it, they're putting guys in the right spots, and those guys are coming to play. And I thought for the second week in a row that the Bison were physically, I mean, that first series, they slapped the crap out of SIU just to start with. A couple of those first couple of hits, I think SIU said, well, crap, this is going to be a long day. Homecoming is not going to be as easy as, as we hoped it would be.
Well, and then now it brings us to really what matters, and you just hit it on the head next week. Is South Dakota State has been superior, I think, in the line of scrimmage with the Bison over the last couple of years. And then you add on a quarterback who's going to get an NFL shot, a running back who's in the NFL right now, and Isaiah Davis. You got receivers like Yankees, they're gone, who were, I thought, just incredible players. Not NFL maybe, but incredible FCS players.
They got a chance, though. They got invited to camps, so they were good.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Isaiah Stolberg defensively is gone for South Dakota State.
But they got Adam Bach back at linebacker.
They do.
I mean, they're still tough up the middle.
The Jacks, how I've defined it all the years, the Jacks are not the same. They're not as good, but they're still the best team in FCS. I think that just observing what I've been able to see of them and NDSU is, I think the gap has closed. I mean, it was the 2022 game at the Dome when NDSU was about to go up 28-3 or whatever it was before Cam Miller got his personal foul penalty. That game seemed like NDSU was in it. The whole game was a one-score game, but after that, by the time Frisco rolled around that year and Hunter Lipke was out and there's a couple Bison injuries, South Dakota State had just taken off by that time.
Yep.
They were way better than the Bison in Frisco in that title game. The final score showed it 45-21 or whatever it was. And I had Bison ex-players that I would see, out in a bar or something in Frisco go, the Jacks are loaded. I mean, just loaded. And it's tomorrow might not be what we want it to be. It just maybe just that time that they finally caught us, and they got a class of players that are just better than us now. Last year, that held true the whole season. I think when NDSU went down to Brookings last year, I think we all kind of thought, yeah, can NDSU hang in the game? It wasn't can NDSU win, it's can NDSU hang in this game. And they didn't get steamrolled, although the game was never really in doubt. I think this year, even with the injuries, I think it's going to be a hell of a football game on Saturday. I think the teams are much, much closer, in part because NDSU's better defensively, and in part because South Dakota State's taken a step back.
Yeah, and so you kind of meet them halfway. Home field advantage, we'll see if that parlays over 4 quarters. The Bison have, I think, played well in the first half with the crowd, but then they usually bail. I don't think they'll bail this time.
I think that'll be a 4-quarter game. Yeah. You know, Jeff, you look at this game, and I think you look at home field is going to be a big factor this weekend. The fact that Cam Miller has never beaten South Dakota State, I think that sticks in the back of his head. And I think this Bison team has got a lot to prove. I think, just physically, I think they've been questioned in their physicality, which I think they've been answering the bell the last 2 weeks. But here's the thing I think they really need to understand, or at least what I would think they need to understand is win or lose Saturday, it doesn't really matter because there's a really good chance you're probably going to see this Jackrabbit team again. So I don't think you want to just make this is the Super Bowl, baby. We got to beat them here.
But I think this is a really important game for the program. I think for the NDSU program, and as we like to say, for the brand, because the Jackrabbits the last couple of years have clearly been the better team. But NDSU, they got to sort of assert themselves again and say, wait a second here, you're chasing us again. You guys had your 2 years. We're still North Dakota bleeping state. Come and get us.
Yeah.
And I think NDSU lost a little swagger against the Jacks the last couple of years. And I think it's Sam Niederman and I, the radio guy, were talking before the Colorado game, and the Bison fans, rightly so, we're all excited for the game against Deion Sanders and the Buffaloes, right? And that's fine. That game was really important, in the moment, and to make a splash nationally. And NDSU held up. NDSU people said they're still NDSU. I think this game, though, like Sam and I agreed, this is bigger for the program. I think they need win or lose. You said it really doesn't matter. I think it does matter. I think NDSU needs to win this game. I know they're still going to make the playoffs, even if they lose the Bison. They might see them again in the playoffs, whatever. But I think they got to say, and this is all cliched, and it's all masculine BS, you're not going to come into Fargo this time and beat us. We're going to beat you and make you come back here in December if you want to beat us again. And I think the fans feel that way. I think the administration feels that way. I think the players feel that way. And I think Tim Polsek, we saw a sliver of what he wants to do against UND, where he said, this matters. I think it's going to be unbelievable this week in practice.
And I think, I think this game means a lot when it comes to seeding.
Well, just to get there, the winner of this game will not have to face Montana State.
Right, you get to play at home in December, and I think that's probably the biggest thing about this game. Like I said, would you rather play in Brookings in December or in Fargo? And
or not have to go to Bozeman,
or not be in a bracket where you have to see them again until there's the national championship game. Where I'd rather face Montana State, or in that.
Now there's
scenario.
a lot of assumptions there. South Dakota's going to have something to say about this too.
Yeah, that last game of the year with South Dakota, that could come down to a conference title depending on how this weekend turns. NDSU's got a crap ton of games that mean a lot still coming up here. I know you got the I'll say it finally, Missouri State, and I really mean it this time.
The actual Missouri State is pretty good.
Yeah.
They might do better than we think. Although that game's in Fargo, but
yep. You got Murray on the road, which I don't should be like playing Youngstown. Yeah. And Northern Iowa. Good, yeah. So, but I think if the Bison take care of business, the South Dakota State game does loom large in the big scheme of things.
And here's, I wrote this in my column. I know that for the last 4 years, whatever, I've beaten the drum a million times that FCS is dwindling in terms of quality, and we're down to about 3 or 4 teams now that are really even interesting.
Pretty much
in FCS. But this is one of those games that still matters, and I am the most cynical, bored guy with FCS that could possibly be. This is going to be a hell of a week. It's going to be fun this week because of all the things we've already talked about. And Bison fans for years, mostly rightly so, have bitched about how boring the games are. Well, I don't want to go to the games because they're always blowouts.
They're over by
halftime. It's the same old, same old. You know what? Here's a game where you can show up and it can be like Georgia Southern 2011 again. It can be like Northern Iowa 2011. Sorry, Georgia Southern 2012. Northern Iowa 2015. James Madison 2016. And it can be nuts and electric, but the fans have to be interested and they have to be invested. And I get it why you've been bored for 5 years, but this is the one you've been waiting for. It's an actual FCS competitive game that matters, and it should be fun.
And it's for the Marker. Come on.
Yeah, I mean, no, seriously. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, this.
Actually, the Marker started as kind of a joke.
Guys, we've seen so many crappy games.
Yeah.
The last 15 years. I mean, there's been some really good ones, but the vast majority of the last 10 years have just been like the game today. I mean, it's good for NDSU for being so good that they've made it that way, and good for them for winning so much. And it's incredible what they've done. But we've seen so many crappy games. Everybody built up the UND game last week to be the big 2 versus 7 showdown. That was a crap game. What a boring game. People were bored by the second touchdown NDSU scored. So get into this game. This is it. This is what we've been waiting for years, for God's sakes.
Yeah, I could have belted out the signals for UND after like the 3rd drive. There was no silent count needed. There was in the opening drive. It was pretty good. They had a couple false starts. And the crowd can make a difference like that.
Jeff, a couple of just random thoughts coming back when you talked about getting some penalties. I thought this was an awkwardly officiated game. It was just like penalties that they called some of the weirdest penalties that you don't see in the same game called all the time. It was like simulating the signal or confusing the signal, sideline warnings not once but twice. It was illegal substitution after the offense brings in the players. The Bison are running out there, and then it was just a really, really weird pace to this game to me on an official standpoint. But so as we're driving around town today, I'm listening to the local radio station that's covering the Salukis, and they were giving their predictions for the game, and I giggled just listening to what they were saying.
What were they?
One guy had the Salukis, and I get that they're going to say the SIU would win the game. He had it 52-48. I'm going, if the Salukis couldn't score 52 points in 3 games versus NDSU with that offense.
That guy was in the press box, by the way.
Oh no!
And he told somebody that's what his prediction. And he said, "Here's the story: Southern Illinois pays him." So he goes. You know what? I get it. He was talking to somebody else in the press box. He goes, if I wasn't like on Team SIU, I probably would have picked NDSU, but I'm not going to step on the people who signed my paycheck.
Yeah,
at least he's honest, I guess.
Yep. There was another guy who said it was going to be a tight one, but SIU would win like 27-17, and then the last guy thought that SIU would win 28-21, and I'm just thinking, apparently these guys either don't read anything, don't watch anything.
I think I picked 42-3, so
yeah,
it was on track.
Yeah, I was actually so I walked down and hung around by the office. I don't get a chance to do that a lot on these games, so I just wanted to kind of feel like I did in Colorado. I want to see what they look like up front. And I'll tell you what, the SIU, I told Dom, I said, if the Bison can't rush the ball and or sack their quarterback against these guys, it's not just a size thing. None of them look like grown men. The Bison have some guys who look like grown men, and SIU just isn't there right now.
Well, before we wrap it up, let's do a little early betting lines, shall we, on the South Dakota State game?
That's a good question. Is what are the lines? What's the opening line going to be?
It's got to be South Dakota State, doesn't it? I would think. I mean, until I see NDSU beat them.
Well, but
that's just my personal opinion.
But this is Vegas now, so they want to spur money being placed on the game. But I think you're right, though. I think it's got to be the Jacks by
3.
I think 3.5.
Yep, I would say 3.5.
I'm gonna say 1.5.
Yeah, you're saying 1.5. Stace is 1.5.
I'm gonna say 1.5. I think you get the 2 points at home now. It's not 3 anymore, and the Jacks kind of controlled the series.
But they got the healthier quarterback. They do.
I still think the home field advantage. People still buy into that. Vegas, like a lot of FCS people, just probably don't pay as close of attention to it as they probably should.
But I think the Fargo Dome is an advantage. Not as much as UND tries to make it out to be, because that's like the total excuse for UND losing is, well, you can't win at the Dome. Jacks have come up here several times and won in the Dome. You can do it if you're a good football team. But I think, again, if the crowd is like it was in the heyday, that's going to make a difference. It makes it hard to play for the other team. If the Jacks get up 14-0 right away, then it's the crowd's out of the game, right? So I think 3.5, something like that's what it's going to be. All right, boys, thank you. Stacey Anderson, WDAY-TV, Jeff Kolpack of the Forum, and me, Mike McFeely, flying back at 25,000 feet or so. I have no idea what we're at. I don't have an altimeter or what's it called? Altimeter in front of me. I don't have that, so I'm saying 25,000 feet. Thanks for listening. We'll have an entire week of wall-to-wall coverage between Kolpack, Izzo, myself, everybody. We're going to be all over it in Forum Communications covering this massive, huge, oh my God, what a game. This has been the McFeely Mess Podcast. Thanks for listening. We'll talk again soon.
Thanks for listening to the McFeely Mess Podcast at inforum.com. For more podcasts and columns, head to inforum.com and search Mike McFeely